Hi there, my name's Vince from mymatevince.com, and in this video today we're going to talk about one-handed gaming on the Nintendo Switch. So you or someone you know might be forced to just use your left hand or just use your right hand. So I'm going to cover some options in this video, and hopefully if you like the look of one of them you can research it some more and then you might be able to get something set up. So at this moment, this video is made in January 2020, and most of the controllers are designed for people with two hands, but that doesn't cover the whole of the world's population. There's a lot of people out there with limited mobility who can only use one of their hands. Now, on the Nintendo Switch, unfortunately, natively, you cannot remap the buttons. If you could, it would be amazing, because if you have a look at a standard Joy-Con controller, look at the amount of buttons on here. Yeah, so you can see now, if you could remap the buttons, so for example, if you could remap these to mimic these buttons here, then this would open up a lot of games to a lot more people. Now, hopefully in the future, Nintendo will allow it, but at this moment in time, it is not possible. It's not just the right thing to do, it would also make financial sense as well, because they're going to sell more units, so financially it makes sense as well. So I'm hoping in the future that they will do something like that. But until then, we have to use different workarounds. Some of them simple, some can be more complicated. So even if you're not a person with limited mobility, I still think you're going to get a bit of fun from this video, because there's going to be a few different ideas in there anyway. So I'm hoping you're going to enjoy it. So sit back and yeah, relax and enjoy. Yep, first option really is do nothing. There are some games that you can play without using any weird adapters, just natively working on the Nintendo Switch. So for example, on Mario Kart 8, you can see on the left there, we can turn smart steering on and off. And if you look in the middle, you see we can turn on motion controls, and we can auto accelerate on as well. So with this one now, it would be easy to play one-handed by just using these actual features already built into the game. But there is games where you can actually remap the buttons, so let me show you one of them now. So on the old Neo Geo games, you have an option to go into the settings, and then you can go up to button settings, and then you can remap the buttons here. So by mapping the buttons to what's comfortable for yourself, depending on the game, then you can just play standard games on the Nintendo Switch with just one Joy-Con, but you're very limited because you're relying on the developers of the game to have included that in the settings. Let's move on to something else. This next one, and also for quite a few of them in this video, we're going to be using this Titan 1 adapter. The reason I'm using this adapter is because it allows you to use non-standard Switch controllers on the Switch, and also it allows you to remap the buttons when you plug it into your PC. So you plug this into your PC using the Titan 1 software, you then map the buttons to where you want them to be, and you save them on here, and you can have various different mappable settings on here. So when I plug this in, it's going to be on 0, I can hit this, and then you can go to mapping number 1, number 2, number 3. So you can use something like this and have different settings for different games, because if you're playing Mario Kart, you will want different settings on this to if you were playing, for example, a Neo Geo game or something else. But now, you might just get lucky without even putting this near a PC. It might just work if the buttons here happen to be the ones that you actually want working, but that is just going to be pot luck. You have no way of knowing before connecting it up. So if you have a look here now, if I plug it into one of the USB ports, it will just be flashing there. I'm then going to plug in this little flight stick and it will come up with 0. If I wanted to, I could then press this button and it will go to 1. And then if I keep on pressing it, it will go to all the other mappable settings I have on here. At the moment, I've only got 0, which is nothing, and I've got 1. But I'm going to leave it on 0 just to show you that in this instance, you don't necessarily always have to program it. So if you have a look up here now, you can see when I move there, it goes that way, and when I move there, it goes that way. So let's move down now, and I want to show you under the system settings what the buttons actually do. Right, so if you have a look here now, this is just going to be working as an analog stick, and then we've got A, B, X, and the trigger here will be Y. This sort of sliding thing down here doesn't do anything, and then this, interestingly, up here is a D-pad. So if we go up, down, left and right, and you can see how quick and responsive it all is. Yeah. So it works pretty good, and it might just happen to have the buttons where you want them to be, but it's quite unlikely. but with the Titan one we can map them. So let's map them now, and let's maybe try to play Mario Kart with one hand, and then I can, for example, have maybe this is accelerate and this is drift or power up or something. I'll work out whatever's comfortable, and then we'll give that a go. So I've remapped the buttons now using the Titan 1 software, and just to give an example, if you look at that trigger there, you see the trigger actually says A, and if you look at the left trigger it says B. So every time I press A and B on here now, it's going to think to do ZL and ZR. So now I can drift around corners and use the power up. So all I have to do is unplug the PC from here, and then I have to put this to number 1, because we've now got it mapped to the setting number 1 on here. And now watch this, if I press the trigger this time it will be A, yeah? So you can see the buttons are now different. That will be B, that will be ZR, and that will be ZL. So for Mario Kart now, this will be absolutely perfect. So let's have a quick game. I'm going to fast forward through it all, and I'm going to use my right hand, and let's see what position I can get. I'm going to do 150cc, which I normally do. I haven't got any of the enhancements like auto accelerate or motion controls or the smart steering on. Right, so we're on the last lap and I've had first place for quite a while, so you can see it's definitely a viable option. And using this controller with these buttons like this now, this is the first time I've played this one. So obviously it's going to be a lot harder when you do it online, so you're not just against the computer. But I think with practice, I can't see why you wouldn't be just as good using one hand on a game like this as two hands. That would help a lot if this flight stick could be... well, I'm not going to win. Oh, I thought I was going to come first there. Okay, I came second in the end. But what would help is if there were suckers on the end here to stick it down, because a couple of times when I was going over, especially when you're drifting, I topped that over. But there you go, second place. Not bad, and I was in first for most of it. And it makes it just as enjoyable, if not more enjoyable, than using the Joy-Cons or the Pro Controller. Right, let's move on to another setup. Right, so in this one we're going to be using a Nintendo Switch Pro Controller, and we're going to be using it on Wonder Boy up here. So what we want to do is we want to pretend now that it's a right-handed controller. So I want this right stick to actually be the left analog stick, and I might as well swap this one over to the right analog stick just so we still have the function on the controller. Now on Wonder Boy normally you would do the B for jump, and you would normally do Y for like the fire breathing. So I can't have my thumb on here if you've only got one hand and press these buttons while having my thumb on here. It would be too awkward to do. So I'm going to swap those buttons up to the R and the ZR. So I'm not going to go into too much detail here because it's quite in depth and you really need to watch your own videos on it, but I'm just going to quickly show you how you would do it. So to begin with, we want to swap the right analog stick to a left analog stick. So we're going to go to left, and then that other axis there, left, might as well change that over to L3. That's that one done. Now over on the left, I'm going to change it to the right. And change L3 to R3, so that's them ones done. Now, normally B is jump, so that's going to become ZR. So B on the PlayStation controller, you can change the controller to any controller you want, but B is going to be X, so we need to go cross, and we need to change that to ZR, which is going to be R2 on the PlayStation controller. And then we're going to do Y, which is normally square. We're going to change that to R1. Right, and now I'm going to go to generate script. And now I'm going to go down and I'm going to go to programmer. It's too small to see, but programmer's down the bottom here. And now I've called this Wonder Boy Switch Pro. I'm going to drag that and I'm going to put it into the third slot. So I'm going to drag that over, put it into the third slot here. And then I'm going to go to Program Device. and then what will happen is this little device here will reset itself, and there you go, done already. Yep. So now we can unplug it. So we've just got the device on its own. We're going to go to number 3, and now if we go up on the TV screen, you will now see on Wonder Boy, with purely the Titan 1 in there, it will be working as the right analog stick. Right, so watch this now. Can you see there? That's moving along there, and this should be fire, and that should be jump. Okay, now you see what's happening is it's doing double function. So that's to change it into the 8-bit. That's because I need to put that function onto another key. So for example, I can swap that maybe onto the B button here. Yeah, so I'm just going to quickly do that. Okay, so now look, I've got that on B. Yeah, I've got the volume down just purely because of copyright. But if you have a look now, you can see moving along here. And we should be able to play it one-handed. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but it would be doable. See what I mean? And you can see how much easier it is doing it this way because we've swapped the analog sticks over. Right, okay, let's move on to another one. Right, so this time we're mixing it up a little bit. We're using a Magic NS adapter. Now, we can't do any mappable buttons on this adapter here, but we can do mappable buttons on the Xbox Adaptive Controller. So what we're going to be doing is using a Joy-Con connected wirelessly to the Magic NS adapter, and you can see it working here. But at the same time, we've got the Xbox Adaptive Controller connected via a wired connection. So with this now, I've plugged it into my PC, and then you can map the buttons to whatever you want it to be. So you can see we have a massive button here called A and a massive one called B. Now this won't map the same as the Nintendo Switch because on the Nintendo Switch they've got the A and B the opposite way to an Xbox. So on Xbox this is A and this is B. So that's what it's going to happen here. We have to actually press B because it thinks it's a controller like this. We have to press B to mimic A. So it's a little bit confusing, but once you get your head around it, it's straightforward enough. Now, I've set it up so that I can do the jump and the fire on here, but it means that I haven't got a button to press A on to actually enter into the game. So yes, you can plug in something in here into the button A. These are all 3.5mm jacks, so you can have all separate buttons plugged in by a 3.5mm jack, so it's no problem to plug one in there. You've also got a USB slot here for your right analog stick and a USB slot here for like a joystick for your left analog stick, but right now we don't need it because we're using the Joy-Con, so we're mixing up wired and wireless, so it's kind of like Copilot in a way. So what we're going to do is I've got it set the buttons mapped for Wonder Boy on program number 2 here. I'm going to put it to number 3. Number 3 basically has got nothing set to it. So now I can press B, which is the same as A, to get me into the actual game itself. Yeah. So now if I just get into here, let me go back to 3 again. So press A, that should get me in. Now I can change it to number 2, like that. And these will now be mapped. Look, see, fire, jump, fire, jump. So the idea is you could possibly be playing with your left hands here. These are just, remember, these are just all ideas. Everybody's going to have different needs, but you can be playing with your left hands here, and you could be using your elbow on these bits here. Yeah, and then for example, bend down, fire at the enemies, and it all seems pretty responsive. Rumble and everything works, so you get the idea. Right, let's show you another option. Right, 6. Left, 3. Down, 1. Right, 4. A. X. Y. Click left. Click right. R. ZL. Okay, so this is the setup here, and it's actually quite straightforward once you get your head around it. All we're doing is converting our voice inputs into keyboard inputs, and then converting the keyboard inputs into controller inputs so the Switch can understand it. So the voice inputs are being converted via some software called Voice Attack, and then we tell it what words to listen out for example, up, down, left, right, etc., and then assign them certain buttons on the keyboard. And then we're using this Titan 1 adapter down here to convert those keyboard inputs into Switch inputs. So for example, if we were to use the word up, then you can see here I've got that down as W if you have a look at up on the D-pad here. So if I say up, it's going to press W. If I said down, it's going to be pressing S. And then the Titan 1 adapter down here will be converting that W into up on the D-pad here, and S will be converted to down on the D-pad. Now you might have heard me say a load of numbers after I said left and right. All that's happening there is how long the button is pressed for. So if you have a look here now, if I was to say right 1, you see it only moves 1. And if I was to say, for example, right 10, it's going to hold it on. Right, so that last part of the video there with the voice activated Nintendo Switch was just taken from a video that I did earlier on, about 6 months or so ago. So if you want to see the full video, just search my channel for voice activated Nintendo Switch. I haven't got one of these to show you. This was designed by someone who hasn't profited from this. He's basically put the designs out there that you can print off yourself using a 3D printer. So this is the guy's channel, so check out the videos on it. He's done this one, which is a left-handed one, and he's also done this one here, which is a right-handed one, because obviously it's a different setup, isn't it? Because these are designed to be left and right. So yeah, watch those videos if you're interested. I think something like this would be ideal because you're going to have the full range of buttons. So if they were roughly put like that, you have your thumb on here, and then you would have your fingers round here, and you'd have to get used to using the right analog stick. I think it would take a lot of practice, but I think it would be doable. And then in theory you could do games like Breath of the Wild, because you've got the full range of buttons, which you're never going to have the full range of buttons on something like the flight stick that I showed you earlier. And also it's very cheap, and this is a major thing as well. This is never going to be patched out by Nintendo. This is always going to work because it's just Joy-Cons. All you're doing is putting a bit of plastic in the middle of them. While everything I've showed you today in theory could be patched out, you would hope that the makers of the adapters and stuff would then overcome that, release a new firmware update, and then it would all start working again. But this one here will work for as long as your Nintendo Switch is working, because this is all supported by Nintendo, because you're just using Joy-Cons, and they don't know what's been connected in between the Joy-Cons because it's only a lump of plastic. So I think they are both a really good idea. So check them out if you want to know more about that. And I think if you could get used to that, I think that would be the best one to do. If you know what works for you and you play one-handed, add it down to the comments and you will help other people out. So if you've gone through 3 or 4 different setups and one of them works really well for you, add it down to the comments, because then if somebody wants to set something up for their son or daughter, they might go straight to your example rather than trying out the 3 or 4 things that failed that you tried before. So if you've got any enjoyment from it, or if it's helped you out, please give it a thumbs up, and please subscribe for more how-to videos. Take care. Bye now.